All right, so I have finally started Monster. I've been putting out, not so much putting off this series for the past 10 years, but I did not have access to this series for the past 10 years. But now that I'm actually working with a job that makes money, I'm like, ooh, I can buy all the manga I want. So that is wonderful. I was first recommended this series, like I said, 10-ish years ago, back when I said Death Note was my favorite anime manga. And I was immediately recommended Monster. So I have finally started it, and definitely off to a good start. First impressions are very positive. Essentially, this series is about a doctor and his decisions ethically and morally and the consequences of them. And then there's a serial killer plot line, and it did not go as I expected. What I thought this series was about was the doctor was a serial killer, and I'm like basically Dexter vibes is what I thought. I was wrong. The characters so far are very good. The doctor's name is Tenma, and he is just struggling to be a good person and living with the consequences of the actions that he's allowed to get into place through no fault of his own. Nothing he did is his fault, or what happened is not his fault. That's on other people. So the story. I'm also very excited to see what happens with his at the start of the series. His girlfriend, what's her name? Is it Eva? Something like that. Really excited to see what happens with her and if this author can actually write a complex female character or if she's just going to be, I hate this woman. And honestly, I'm fine with either. Both can be done very well. All right, so the series starts off with Tenma performing a surgery on a famous opera singer, and it goes well. It's good publicity for the hospital, but then he's immediately confronted, or shortly after, by the wife of a Turkish factory worker, I believe it is. And it's her saying, like, give me my husband back. He was here first. He should have been on, you should have performed his surgery, and he'd still be alive. Tenma realizes that he had been pulled off that surgery to go on a more high-profile one, and the doctor assigned just isn't as good as he is. If he had stayed on that surgery, then that man would probably still be alive. So he confides into his girlfriend, fiance, Eva, who is the daughter of the director, I believe, of the hospital, and his mentor. So she's saying, don't you know all lives aren't equal? And that really hits Tenma, and he's very much struggling with that, like, because he came a doctor to save people and advance medical research, but he's really been realizing he's playing more into the political and social structures of the hospital to get ahead. So he's directly under the chief of the hospital or director of the hospital, and he's writing all his papers and presentations and making him look good in exchange for the director taking care of him. He's dating his daughter. He's the chief of surgeon. He's in line to be the next director of the hospital with time. And part of that is taking the surgeries assigned to him. So he feels guilty that he allowed himself to be pulled off the case, and he knows it's wrong. But at the same time, he's like, I'm not accountable for that. I was just doing what my superiors told me to do. And he's very shocked at his fiance's just casual declaration, not all lives are equal. And you could almost argue, I feel like the series could go into a way of, well, if you don't take care of the high profile ones and the hospital doesn't have good publicity, then it's not going to get funding. You can't do research. You can't help even more people. Not saying that's good at all. But that might be a logical reason that they could use for why they pulled their best surgeon off one case to put him on another. But then you obviously have the option of everyone is equal. They all deserve the best care. They were there first. So that's the surgery he should have stayed on. He tries to talk to the director about his feelings, even just talk about the research. He's very interested in working, I think it was vasospasms or something like that. He's like, I'm close to finding a new treatment, and the director is just like, yeah, you need to cancel your research because I'm doing this meeting presentation and I need you to go over my manuscript or write it for me. And again, Tenma is just like, this really crushes him. Like, he wants to do good with his medical degree and being a doctor, and he's just not being allowed to with the political and social structures of the hospital if he wants to advance professionally. And he's starting to realize even the reason he came from Japan to Germany, because this place takes place in Germany, was because of a paper that was published under this director's name. And he's realizing, well, that was probably written by someone else anyway. A call comes in about a home invasion. Wife and husband were shot and killed. Daughter is traumatized, and her twin brother was also shot in the head but still alive, and he's immediately rushed to the hospital. Tenma is the doctor on call, or he rushes in. He's scrubbed up for the surgery. He's prepared. The bullet is in a very delicate spot. He is confident he can do it, and he is the best in this hospital. He doesn't think anyone else can handle this surgery. He's literally about to cut into this little boy's skull and trying to save his life when someone comes in, call for you from the director, it's an emergency. The mayor collapsed because of this. They need you on that surgery instead. And they're going to put someone else in for the kid. And Tenma's just like, that other doctor can't handle this. They can't do it. And instead of following the director's order and playing ball and all that, he goes back in and saves the little boy's life. The little boy lives, but the mayor dies. And that is just immediately a blow to his career. And the one thing that can drive my blood pressure up is someone doing the right thing and being punished for it. So he immediately loses his standing and respect in the hospital by the other higher up people above him, I guess. So his team says they abandoned him on the mayor's surgery and they weren't able to get someone competent enough to take care of it in his place, even though he's saying, I didn't abandon you. I stuck with the patient that I was assigned and was about to work on. He loses his spot of the chief of surgery or whatever his title was. He's no longer in the running really to become the director of the hospital in the future. His fiance just tosses her engagement ring at him and is just like, we're done. You're not going to give me the life I need and want, so I have no use for you. Let me go off and immediately start dating some other doctor. Bitch. And then yeah, he's told off by his mentor saying, I have no use for people who cause trouble. He goes out and gets completely drunk and then eventually heads back to the hospital where in this little boy's room, he's taking care of him, monitoring his symptoms and everything or his vitals. And he's just saying, I can't believe this. I did the right thing. This wasn't my fault. And in his frustration says something along the lines of, I wish they were all dead. Now, what I thought this series was the doctor became a serial killer. That is what I thought. So, and I'm not ruling that out. I'm not going to rule out him passing out drunk in an alley wasn't him having a psychotic break and then split personality, killing people without knowing it. But apparently that's not what's going on. Unless he's also hallucinating, still it's not what's going on. So the little boy hears this and the hospital is trying to make use of the publicity that these twins are getting. So the little girl is traumatized and has only uttered like a single word of kill. And the little boy hasn't regained consciousness yet. So the heads of the hospital kick Tenma off his case with the little boy or his patient, kicks him out, puts a new doctor on, wants to reunite the kids and get a photo for the newspapers, but Tenma is just like, no, it's too early, you can't do this, they're not ready to meet. But they do it anyway. Little girl freaks out, and that's when the little boy regains consciousness. Then you have the director and the higher-ups and everyone who's given Tenma trouble just like eating the gifts, like the chocolates and candies that was given to the little boy and the little girl hoping for their recovery, and jerks, all of them. All right, like I said, Tenma is now like blackout, wasted, alley. Then he goes home and the police end up coming to his door. He's like, what's going on? And they're like, the director and two of his colleagues, the ones higher up and the one who had taken Tenma's spot as his spot in the hospital, have all been murdered. Do you know anything about that? And he's just like, what? So he goes to the hospital, or he goes and figures out what's going on. We cut to the funeral. It has turned out that the candy that they had eaten that was delivered to, I forget if it was a little boy or a little girl, was actually poisoned. So the ex-fiance is at the gravesite screaming that she wants her father back and is just absolutely distraught. And I'm like, oh, will this be a turning point for her character in some way? Tenma's friend looks at her and is like, yeah, she's a princess who was given everything she ever wanted. No wonder and like her father always took care of her. No wonder she's screaming like a banshee now. And I'm like, rude. So rude. And Tenma also calls him out on that. It's like, how could you say something so cruel? Because Tenma, though, is the best doctor in the hospital and someone else has come in to fill that spot for the director's job, they're like, we place things on merit, not any political social stuff. So you're the best. You're going to be back to the chief of surgery, and he's in line to be the director again. The fiance, now fresh off the funeral, pretty much goes to him. This might have been a year later. It doesn't matter. Eventually goes to him. Is just like, how about we give it another try? And I'm like, bitch. So Tenma is just like, no, leaves the restaurant. We're not getting back together. I've seen your true colors. And he, in the next 9 years, elevate through the hospital, very well respected, but you also have this inspector who they met at the funeral, that's trying to figure out what happened. And he has this little quirk where he remembers everything. He moves his hand like as if he was typing on a keyboard, and that like files everything away so he never forgets it. I'm really interested to see more of this character. He's very creepy. All right, so we're now the 8 years later. He's the head of surgery, refused to get back together with his girlfriend, and now several couples are being murdered. Someone is brought in. He's like a lock picker who was suspected to be involved in some way, gets hit by a car and is rushed to the hospital, and Tenma takes on that surgery to get him better, where the inspector is back and he's just like, make sure he survives. We have questions for him, but he still suspects Tenma because of how his career has improved since the deaths of his colleagues. Tenma, of course, performs the surgery, and he's all right. He eventually comes to, still very shaken, and is saying, like, it was a monster. A monster is responsible for these murders, and he had actually killed his other friends. The monster had killed the lockpicker guy's friends and crew after these murders. Tenma has to kick the inspector out just because he's being too harsh, and he ends up talking to this guy, and at one point he mentions, like, I never wanted this. When I was a kid, all I wanted was this cuckoo clock, and that was my first time, like, lockpicking to break in to try to get it, but I got caught, and I've gotten better since. Tenma, being the sweet boy that he is, walks past a shop and sees a cuckoo clock kind of thing, and is just like, why don't I get this for him? It might help his recovery, remind him of childhood, that kind of thing. So he goes back to the hospital with this gift for his patient, and then he sees a dead cop on the ground, and his patient is missing. So he runs and tracks him down, finds him at a warehouse, kneeling before a shadowy figure. And it is revealed that this shadowy figure, the serial killer, is actually Jonathan, the little kid, the little boy who heard his pleas for those higher-ups in the hospital to be killed and die. And he has become a serial killer, or technically might have already been a serial killer, at the ripe age of like 10. And he kills the lockpick guy in front of him, saying, like, this is who I am. I actually respect you for saving me. I think of you higher than my own father, or I think of you as a father, so I'm going to let you live. And Tenma's just like, you can't do this. I know who you are. I'm going to tell people you can't, like, don't kill the lockpick guy. And he already did. He then did. And it's just like, Jonathan isn't even my real name. You'll never find me. No one knows about my past. Have a good life, doctor. And he leaves. Tenma immediately goes to the investigator guy and is just like, this is who's killing people. This is what happened. I don't actually think they believe him very much. And then we cut to a new character, Nina. So she's just going about her life. She's wants to be a prosecutor. What else? She's in Aikido, something like that. Some martial arts. And she's just a bright, happy, energetic girl about to turn 20. How is she in law school already? Don't you need like an undergrad degree for that? 18. She should be at least like 22, unless she like graduated high school early. I'm assuming she's smart. So she's just a very happy character. And then you get these clips of like, I don't remember anything of the past like 10 years or the first 10 years of my life. And you're like, oh damn. She's talking to her psychiatrist. She's getting these emails saying like, I'm gonna, what's this, like, smother you in flowers or something like that, or I'm gonna come for you on your 20th birthday, and you're like, oh damn. And then it's just like her parents being like, we should tell her that she's adopted now that she's turned 20. First of all, you should tell your kids that much earlier. However, I'm like, oh damn. So this is the twin sister of Jonathan. What was the name she was going by at the time? Anna. Her name when she was, that the doctor knew her, was Anna. I also do not trust her therapist. However, this is simply because he reminds me of the guy from Helsing. So, and that's probably just because German character. But regardless. So she's going about her life. She's getting these emails. She thinks it's from a boy at school that likes her, but it turns out not to be. Then she gets a glimpse of Jonathan just walking through the crowd, looking at her, and she immediately faints. Tenma is searching for Jonathan, and he's hunting him down through all these past aliases and foster families that he had been in the past, realizing that the murders that are happening now are of Jonathan's old foster families. And he tracks down this old man who knew him as a child, and they start talking. And it turns out he was a Nazi that fought in World War II on the boats or something. And Jonathan had taken a very much an interest in his history and was just obsessed with like terror. So even as a child, this boy was messed up. And then Tenma eventually goes to the police and says, hey, he's going to be going after his sister at some point in time. Like, I need to find them. The police turn him away. So instead he goes to the newspaper and is like, listen, there has to be a record of when he left his foster family, and they would have filed a missing persons report. So help me find that news article. And then he's tracking down the article. The newspaper people do not believe him at all. They just leave him alone in the archives. He's still there the next morning skimming through everything. So one of them are just like, all right, I'll help you, buddy. Let me dig through this. Not because I believe you. I just want you out of here. So they're looking for it. Eventually they go to like a little diner. They get to know each other. The newspaper guy's talking about how his wife left him because he's always working and wanted him to quit smoking. And the doctor's just like, yeah, you should quit smoking. If you probably went back after your wife, she might take you back if you apologize and quit smoking. And he's like, maybe. You really think she would? So eventually they go back. They're looking through the articles again. They find one. And the anxiety I had going back and forth between Nina and the doctor, and it's just like, will he figure out what's happening in time? Because then you're seeing emails to her saying like, hey, it's your birthday, like tomorrow, meet me at this clock tower place. And Tenma knowing that she is going to be taken on her 20th birthday. So they get the article, they're racing to the the house of her parents. My anxiety when they are knocking on the door, I'm like thinking, the parents are dead, they're already dead. She's at the spot, because she just called her parents saying she's meeting a friend at that location. The parents open the door, I'm like, oh, thank God, they're alive. So they try to explain briefly the situation of, hey, your daughter's in danger. They say where she is. Tenma takes the car and goes to her. And the newspaper guy goes to call the police, and he's like, your lines are cut. My anxiety. So then you get her waiting at the location spot, and there's this creepy man cutting flowers. And I'm just like, oh God. And the guy cutting the flowers is just like, no, I've been told to keep you here until something's done. And she's like, I'm sorry, you're what? I'm leaving. Guy in the shadows coming forward. I'm like, oh my God, who is it? You got the doctor running, screaming her name, Anna. And I'm just like, what? And then she's saying, what's that name? And then thank God the man in the shadow was actually the doctor. And I'm like, oh, thank God it's not Jonathan. He's not taking her. So then the guy with the cutting the flowers, he starts trying to stab Tenma with the shears, because he's actually working for Jonathan. But thankfully, the girl has some fighting martial arts skills and takes him down no problem, using Tenma's tie to restrain him. And then they go back to their parents' house and the drive there, and she's all confused, and they open up the door, and you just see the bodies. You see Tenma trying to do CPR, trying to resuscitate the newspaper guy, and you're like, he just wanted to reconnect with his wife, and he would have quit smoking, and it is generally upsetting given how short a time you had with this man. And you're not given enough time to put any pieces together yet, because then there are two cops at the door saying they got a call. And I'm just like, how'd they get a call if the lines were cut? Oh, well, they were probably screaming. They got neighbors, a suburban area. Someone called the cops. Fine, it's fine. So Tenma and Nina go into the police car, and they're driving away. They're saying they're going to take them to the station to give their reports and all that. Then Tenma realizes, hey, we're driving in the wrong direction for the police station. To which they say, oh, we're going to a different station, a different town over. We're not from this location. And Tenma's just like, wait, what? And then he notices some blood on their coat, and he's like, oh, we got to get out of here. So some other cops pull them over or talk to them, and they're like, hey, what's with this car? It's not your regular. It's like, oh, you know how hard we are on vehicles. Tenma's just like, hey, while you guys chat, we're just going to step out for some fresh air. He grabs Nina and throws them both over the bridge to get away. And I'm like, yep, that is an accurate response to you thinking you're in a car with possible serial killers or people working for a serial killer. So they wash up down the river, and they're just in hiding basically in the woods for a couple days, or at least overnight at least. And Nina explains that she was actually the one who shot Jonathan, realizing that he had killed their foster parents. And it's like, why would you save him? You brought this monster back. I tried so hard to be rid of him, as all her memories of those 10 years before have come back to her. And she's screaming and crying. And Tenma is just a good guy who's trying to do his best here. He's just wanted to save lives. That's all he wanted to do. So now he goes back and is thinking, let me go to the actual police, see what's going on, only to confirm that those two men who were driving them away and are likely working for Jonathan are actual cops, and he doesn't know who to trust now. So he makes a call to the newspaper saying, hey, I'm going to bring you a witness, and you have to keep her safe. But when he goes back to the forest, she is gone. And she wrote in a note saying, hey, you were just doing your job, but now I have to take care of this. So I'm assuming she's gone to hunt her serial killer brother. Tenma, not knowing what else to do, goes back to the hospital. He's like, maybe this just won't be my problem. How about it not be my problem? He's treating his patients love him. Cut to the inspector, who finds his tie and tracks it back to the ex-fiancé. She is wasted. 3 divorces in, took everyone for their alimony, and I'm just thinking, I love a selfish character. I love a character who is out just for themselves and will screw everybody over. I hate them in real life. However, in a story, it is just entertaining, and I want to see how narcissistic and full of themselves and how they'll manipulate and take advantage of everyone and how badly they'll screw someone over for their own gain. That is just an entertaining character. So she's just like, all these people only loved me for my money, or only came for me for my money. They didn't actually love me. Well, I took them for everything they're worth 3 times over. And she's wasted with a picture of her and Tenma, realizing he was the only one who actually loved her for her. And when the cop shows up, he's like, hey, this tie was a special edition made only for a specific customer, and it was you. Do you remember who you gifted that tie to? And she's like, how the hell would I remember that? Get out and don't come back unless you're bringing me more alcohol. She then goes to the hospital and confronts Tenma and being like, hey, I think we should get back together. And he's like, no, we're not getting back together. To which she then says, yeah, well, that inspector guy came asking about your tie. I could turn you in. I'll tell him you killed everybody, unless we get back together. Tenma walks away. And I'm just like, bitch. So she immediately goes to the inspector, and she's like, yep, he did it all. He killed everybody. That tie is his. So if you found it at a crime scene, it's because he was there. Oh, yeah, because the tie was used to tie up the guy cutting the flowers. Well, later on, someone comes and kills him, but removes the tie, but only threw it in the bushes, so they found that. Tenma, knowing what's going to happen, has fled the hospital. The patients have, covered his escape just as the inspector was coming in to arrest him. He sneaks out in an ambulance. It's a whole thing. He then goes to a former soldier guy, military, whatever, takes a 5-month boot camp, gets kicked into shape, learns how to use a gun, and now he's off hunting a serial killer. And I did not expect that turn. I did not expect it at all. I don't know if I'm happy with these events. I kind of wanted a little bit more. I like the hospital scenes, so I almost wish he stayed there longer. And I do like the idea of a doctor serial killer. But no, this has been a wild ride. The pacing of this manga, this entire thing, I read it in one sitting. It was fantastic. Even with the limited amount of action, everything's just progressing so forward, fast-paced and forward that it was great. Like I said, one sitting, all of that. And I'm enjoying the characters, I'm enjoying the art style. It starts off with what I felt was Archie Comics kind of feel vibe to it, and then it immediately just got more suspenseful and more in-depth, and you got the serial killer. It was just great. I love this. So can't wait to read the next volume. I will talk to you later.